Welcome back to CIA Declassified. By 1956, the Central Intelligence Agency had a problem. The U-2 spy plane, once thought to be beyond the reach of Soviet interceptors, was being tracked. The Soviets were improving their radar faster than the U.S. could improve its altitude. On a cold day in 1957, the CIA's Richard Bissell received a briefing that changed everything. Quote, the U-2, quote, he was told, is a sitting duck. End quote. The agency didn't just need a faster plane, they needed a ghost. This was the birth of Project Gusto. Based on declassified records from the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, Gusto was the competition to design a successor to the U-2. It was a battle between two titans, Convair and Lockheed, but before they could build the future, they had to understand why the present was failing. They had to understand the, quote, radar cross-section, end quote. Before the A-12, there was Project Rainbow. This was the agency's first attempt to make the U-2 stealthy. They tried to disguise the plane using traps, wires, and fiberglass poles attached to the wings to cancel out radar returns. A quote, the traps were effectively a series of wires and spacers meant to create a destructive interference pattern for the S-band radar. However, the physical drag caused by these attachments reduced the U-2's altitude by 5,000 feet, making it more vulnerable to the very missiles it was trying to avoid, end quote. Rainbow was a disaster. Not only did it fail to hide the plane, but the stealth coatings actually acted as a heat insulator, causing the engines to overheat and in one tragic instance causing a pilot to lose his life during a test flight. This failure taught the agency a vital lesson. You cannot add stealth to a plane. It has to be designed into the very bones of the aircraft. Lockheed's winning design for Gusto was the A-12. It was a titanium beast designed to fly at Mach 3.2 at altitudes over 90,000 feet. But at those speeds, the laws of physics change. The friction of the air turns the cockpit into a furnace. The human factors of Project Gusto were terrifying. Pilots had to wear full pressure suits similar to what astronauts would later wear. If the cockpit lost pressure at Mach 3, the pilot's blood would literally boil. A fact. The A-12 skin reached temperatures of over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The fuel was used as a heat sink to cool the cockpit before it reached the engines. The cameras, the sensors, and the pilot were all that stood between the mission and a molten pile of titanium. Operational logs from the Black Shield missions reveal the psychological strain. Pilots were flying at the very edge of the coffin corner, the narrow margin between stalling and overspeeding. One wrong move and the plane would disintegrate. The A-12 was so fast that by the time a Soviet missile was launched, the plane was already out of the kill zone. But the pilot was always one mechanical failure away from a lonely death over hostile territory. While the speed was impressive, the real breakthroughs of Gusto was the anti-radar. This was the birth of stealth technology as we know it today. Technological breakthroughs. The A-12 was the first aircraft to use Radar Absorbent Materials, RAM. The edges of the wings, the chines, were filled with a honeycomb structure of plastic and iron. This didn't just reflect radar, it swallowed it. Another quote. The objective was to reduce the radar cross-section to the point where the A-12 would appear as no more than a large bird on a Soviet radar screen. This was achieved through the use of non-metallic composites and the radical inward canted tails, end quote. This wasn't just about the shape. They even experimented with additives in the fuel to create a plasma cloud in the exhaust, which would further absorb radar waves. It was science fiction made real. When you look at the Gusto files today, the black ink is most concentrated in the, quote, electronic countermeasures, end quote, sections. The speculation, there are several redacted pages concerning Project Isinglass, Isinglass. Speculation suggests this was a rocket-powered boost glide vehicle meant to fly at Mach 20. The redactions likely hide the high-temperature sensor data. how to see through the plasma shield of a hypersonic vehicle. Even more intriguing are the redactions surrounding the loss of specific A-12 airframes. While 5 are officially listed as lost in accidents, there is speculation that the redacted logs hide a near intercept or a loss due to a catastrophic failure of the RAM coatings over a denied area. The agency maintains a tight lid on the chemical signature of the early stealth coatings, as those formulas are the direct ancestors of what is used on the B-2 and the F-35 today. To understand the sheer scale of Project Gusto, we have to look at the logistical nightmare of its development. Because the aircraft required 93% titanium, a metal primarily found in the Soviet Union, the CIA had to set up shell companies to buy the material from the very enemy they intended to spy on. This was the ultimate irony of the Cold War. A quote, "Our supplier was effectively the Soviet Union. We worked through third parties and fake entities to purchase the ore, which was then shipped to the U.S. to be processed. The Russians never realized they were providing the skin for the plane that would fly over their heads." End quote. The fuel was another miracle of chemistry. Known as JP7, it was so stable that you could drop a lit match into a bucket of it and the match would go out. It required a chemical called, I'm not even going to try and pronounce this, it's TRIETHYLBORANE, known also as TEB, just to ignite. This stability was a non-fiction requirement because the friction of Mach 3 flight would have detonated standard jet fuel inside the tanks. Some researchers speculate that the blue-green flame often reported by witnesses of A-12 test flights was not just the TEB ignition, but a result of the experimental additives mentioned earlier. If true, it suggests that the CIA was actively testing active stealth measures, ionizing the air around the aircraft, decades before the public even knew the word stealth. The secrecy surrounding the A-12 extended to the Area 51 base itself, which was expanded specifically for Gusto. The runway had to be lengthened to 8,500 feet, and the entire facility was hidden behind a curtain of R-4808 in restricted airspace. Declassified memos show that even other branches of the military were kept in the dark, leading to numerous UFO sightings that were actually A-12 test runs. A fact, the A-12 Oxcart was so secret that when a pilot had to bail out over Nevada in 1963, the CIA arrived at the crash site and told the local sheriff that the wreckage was a, quote, nuclear-armed weather balloon, end quote, to prevent any further investigation into the titanium shards littering the desert. Finally, we must address the carrier competition. Before the A-12 was finalized, Convair proposed the fish and kingfish designs, which used ceramic skins to handle the heat. While Lockheed won, many declassified documents regarding the kingfish's radar cross-section remain heavily censored. This leads to the speculation that the kingfish design actually achieved a lower radar return than the A-12, but was rejected due to Lockheed's superior track record with the Skunk Works team. If the kingfish was truly more invisible, the secrets of its ceramic geometry may still be hidden in the vaults of the agency, waiting for a future conflict. Was Project Gusto a success? In purely technical terms, it was the greatest achievement of 20th century aviation. The A-12 never lost a pilot to enemy fire. It flew missions over Vietnam and North Korea that provided intelligence no other platform could reach. However, Gusto was a victim of its own success. The emergence of the SR-71, the Air Force version of the A-12, and the rising power of satellite photography led to the A-12's early retirement in 1968. To the agency men who built it, the Oxcart was a masterpiece discarded before its time, but its DNA is everywhere. Every stealth fighter in the air today owes its life to the iron honeycombs of Project Gusto. Next time on CIA Declassified, we move from the physical invisibility of stealth aircraft to the psychological invisibility of the mind. We enter the controversial world of Project Monarch, While often the subject of wild conspiracy theories, we will look at the cold reality of the declassified files. We'll examine Subproject 58 and Subproject 102. This is the technical record of the agency's personality-splitting research, attempts to use trauma and drugs to create compartmentalized identities within a single subject. It's the story of how the CIA tried to build a wall inside the human soul. Join us next time for CIA Declassified, The Fractured Mind. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.